afternoon and welcome to today's Franzik PC webinar, Property Tax Review. I am Scott Metcalf, a partner here at Franzik PC, and I'm joined by my colleagues Mike Hernandez and Eris Valianis. Before we get started, there are a few housekeeping matters to address. First, you do have the ability to type and submit questions at the bottom of your screen using the chat function. Please feel free to ask us questions throughout the program by using this feature, and we will try our best to address all of your questions today. Second, everyone registered for today's webinar will receive an email that includes a link to a recording. This recording will also be available on our YouTube channel and as a podcast. So this is the property tax levy adoption season when property taxes are front of everyone's mind. So we wanted to spend a little bit of time providing a few updates and reminders, as well as looking at current trends. Today, I am going to be discussing levies and collections. Then Mike Hernandez will provide a summary of current assessment trends. This is particularly relevant given many of our districts focus on how their levies impact typical taxpayers. And finally, Eris is going to review the latest economic development incentives. This is always a hot topic, but even more so recently. So let's get started with some of the key, that is us, in case you were confused. Let's get started with some of the key things to keep in mind about the property tax levy and collection process. The 2022 levies that you adopted last year either have been or are in the process of being collected at this point. Outside of Cook County, everything is normal. The train just keeps chugging along like it always does. In Cook County, however, this is the second year in a row when the second installment property tax bills are coming out late. For a number of years, second installment property tax bills were mailed in July and due in August. This year, however, bills will be mailed November 1st with a December 1st due date. However, the bills are already available online, so the Treasurer's Office is likely already receiving some payments and may well be making distributions soon. I know that I got notice from my mortgage company saying that my taxes had already been paid, so I'm sure that there are payments going on. This year, or the 2022 equalization factor is 2.9237. That's 3% lower than the prior year's equalization factor. And what that means is that if hypothetically there were no changes in any of the assessed values within your districts, the EAV of your district would actually decline from the prior year because that multiplier is 3% lower. However, assessments never stay the same from year to year, and this is especially true in the north suburbs where there was a reassessment. And that reassessment will definitely more than counteract the decline in the equalization factor. Now, looking ahead to this year's levy, the 2023 property tax levies that are being adopted now, as everyone knows, are due by the last Tuesday in December, if you want them extended. And I think we all want to have our levies extended. The CPI factor that's going to be used this year in the property tax extension limitation law calculations is 6.5%. But as we all know, the increase is capped at 5%. So the increase over the prior year will only be 5% except for new property and recovered TIF value. And that extension that exception to the property tax extension limitation law is important because you may actually be able to extend more than 5% over your prior year's extension, given the fact that you can account for new property and recovered TIF value. And that ability to go above 5% means that some of your levies may well exceed a 5% increase over the prior year's extension. And that brings into play the truth in taxation law.
Hey, Scott, we do have a message from the chat that they were notified by the county clerk's office that they have changed the levy due date from 12/26 to 12/19 because the office is closed on 12/26, which is the Tuesday after the Christmas holiday. So Mark Campbell just shared that with us.
Is that all county clerks or just one particular county clerk?
He just said by the county clerk. So Mark, let us know what county you're in. Thank you, Scott.
Yes, that's interesting. That's new information. Thank you for sharing it. So the truth in taxation law applies if your levy is going to be more than 5%, which it may very well be. The requirements under the truth in taxation law are that the corporate authorities estimate the levy 20 days before its adoption. Corporate authorities is a nebulous term in the statute, but anyone who does a presentation of an estimated levy is complying with the law because it's defendable as the corporate authorities estimating the levy. And then there has to be a truth in taxation hearing that must be advertised in the newspaper not more than 14 or less than 7 days before the hearing. And once the levy is adopted, when it's submitted, there has to be a certificate of compliance. One question that we have been asked is, what happens if your prior year's extension is not finalized by the time that you are publishing your truth in taxation notice? And the good part, the good news answer really is that the property tax extension limitation law has a provision, has the wording in it that says your prior year extension or your estimated prior year extension. So as long as you have an estimate of what your 2022 extension is going to be, you can proceed with your truth in taxation notice.
And then the message from Mark is that he was talking about Lee County, Scott.
Interesting. I think we will need to look into whether or not the county clerks will be doing that in any other counties, because the 26th is the day after Christmas and there may be offices that are closed that day, but we'll see. Maybe they will have some hardy souls in the clerk's offices to receive those levies that are not filed until the last minute. Final thing I'm going to be addressing, which also plays into the truth in taxation law, is the recapture levy, which is another good addition to the property tax code, which allows taxing agencies to recapture refunds from the prior 12 months that were generated as a result of PTAB appeals, tax objection complaints, and certificate of error refunds. Now, this recapture levy is specifically excluded from PTEL, but it's not explicitly clear in the statute whether it's part of the truth in taxation notice. After looking at this extensively, we've reached the conclusion that it is not part of the truth in taxation notice. There are multiple legal reasons I can go into for this, but the key things are that no board action is required in order for the recapture levy to be extended. It is a ministerial duty of the clerk and not a discretionary act of the board in adopting their property tax levy. And then the other component is that the recapture levy amounts may not even be known at the time that you're doing your truth in taxation hearing or publishing your notice. And so that adds credibility to this interpretation as well. Those are the key things we wanted to cover with respect to this year's and last year's levies. But Mike, I know that you have done some digging and can share what the assessment trends are across a number of different counties.
Sure, happy to do so. All right, why don't we, so we're looking at assessment trends. We're looking at the revenue. What I'm sharing right now is the Property Tax Appeal Board, the PTABs. Historical, this is 2 decades of filings. And so when the districts engage in what we refer to as revenue preservation litigation, you assist the counties in defending the tax base, both at the Property Tax Appeal Board or in the county courthouse. And then also some districts have in various counties have been active at the Board of Review level. And so what you see here is there's 3 kind of categories of information here. That's new appeals, that's the gray information toward the left, the column. You see appeals that were closed during the year, that's the green, light green column in the middle. And then you see the appeals that are pending at the end of the year, where you see a substantial increase over the 2 decades. I think what's interesting to look at now is, hey, where are we now? We're emerging from COVID. If you look at 2020, remember March of 2020 is when COVID hit, right? And then you see in March of 2021, you see a substantial backup in the cases that were pending. You see almost 20,000 case increase in filings the next year, because the assessor's offices were really working hard. What are we going to do with COVID? How are we going to handle this? So let's look at the trends. We're out of COVID. Have we fully recovered, and what's happening with the assessment trends? So we're going to give you some information based on some direct contact with the assessing officials. For example, in Lake County, we spoke to the high-level appraiser, appraising official with the county, and discuss the information and what trends they're seeing there. Then we're going to give you some really detailed data from, for example, the northern townships of Cook County. But Lake County, all right, what's the difference? This is they don't do a triennial, right? Lake County and DuPage County, they are on the quad review cycle. And so what's the trend we're seeing now between the last reassessment cycles? Strong residential market. However, the assessments lag behind somewhat. Commercial, retail steady, but still recovering from the pandemic. We're going to talk to you a little about what we're seeing in Cook County and what that recovery, how that manifests itself. Office properties are a challenge. They're a challenge all over. You know, you're going to see even a challenge out in DuPage. So the question is, what do you do with those properties? We're seeing a lot of the different technology companies trying to step in and access some of those properties, but we see it here in Chicago. These offices are really occupied. Wednesday's the big day down here, maybe Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, but it simply is not fully recovered. And so there's a lot of widespread redevelopment when it comes to some of the retail and, you know, what are we going to do with these properties? And industrial up in Lake County seems to be maintaining value. Let's look at the Cook County. Northern suburbs, we're in the first year of the triennial of the reassessment. I know some of you are from either out in the Niles area, Palatine, Schaumburg, Elk Grove, Evanston. Substantial increases here, right? In the commercial category, 30% increases we're seeing so far. In the industrial, 33%. Even in the residential, you're seeing as high as 25%. So you're seeing, okay, so this is why we're seeing so many of these cases, not only at the PTAB, at the Board of Review, but over in the Circuit Court. But what does this mean for trends? Let's talk a little about that in the next slide. So what we are seeing is trending upward are the multi-unit investment residential market properties, right? These are the large apartment buildings. These are the large condo. These are really where the REITs are investing and find that to be a stable market. You also see these multi-townhome condo like developments that we see in some of the northern suburban areas like Schaumburg and Palatine. Commercial, what's happening with commercial? Slow recovery with retail. We're still seeing some closures. I think that in the evidence we see there's still a balance even within the retail business of what are they? Are they online? Are people coming in? We do see a number of the retail stores being repurposed or going through some renovation. I think I saw a recent article about the Water Tower Place in Chicago. Once Macy's left there, how they're repurposing the upper floors there. Office properties, again, difficult. They're difficult in the suburban market. We're seeing high vacancy rates. So when we see appraisals, that's what they're identifying. and we see them, although PTAB traditionally does not give vacancy relief, the Board of Review does. And then you're seeing this widespread redevelopment in the commercial. You see it at the major malls where they're repurposing some of the a closure for the retail department stores, maybe into residential, maybe they're splitting them up. I know down at Woodfield Mall, there was I believe it's an English store that has come and opened up. You've seen a lot of commercials about that. So people are moving in, but it's still trending. It's a slow recovery. Let's look at, okay, so then for those in the south suburbs, here's where we are on the reassessment 2023. All the townships have closed except Rich, Proviso, Lyons, and Worth that's the assessor's office. At the Board of Review, these townships are open: Calumet, Oak Park, Riverside, Berwyn, Cicero, River Forest, Lamont, and Orland. So for those down in that area, let's keep an eye on what the trends, let's see if it's similar to what we've seen elsewhere, because that'll affect your appeals, okay? Let's look at DuPage County. I believe that's what we have next. So again, another quadrennial county. What they saw in a comparison, quadrennial to quadrennial, was a 3.9% average AV increase with a 0.45 increase in average tax rate, which equals an average tax bill increase of 4.35%. But what are the trends now? We had the opportunity to, like we did up in Lake County, to reach out to the Bloomingdale Township, to that assessor office, and to speak to one of the officials there. What are they seeing? Well, it's kind of similar to, in some parts, to what we've seen in Cook County. Industrial's up 30%, at least in Bloomingdale Township, right? Will it happen the rest of the county? We'll have to see. Because remember, that's still 76% residential over in that area. Multi-units, multi-family units, as we talked about earlier. Great investments, at least the market believes they are, 25% increase. That's what we're seeing out there. Retail is a little more stable because it's still recovering. They're seeing 5 to 10%. Residential, 5.5%. And office still seems to be struggling also in the DuPage County area. All right. Thank you, Scott.
Sorry, I don't know if you guys heard that, but I just had a call go to voicemail. So
okay, we saw it.
A little bit of extra content for you guys that was unplanned.
Well, everybody, I'm going to talk about, first of all, thanks for joining us today. It's great to see such a good crowd. A little talk on economic development incentives. Obviously, communities are always competing with each other. It matters to, if you got one village on the north side of the street and another on the south side, it matters where the car dealership goes, where the grocery store goes, where the data center goes. What I want to talk about in particular today are two incentives. There's more out there, but two categories of incentives. One are the incentive assessments. These are really limited to Cook County, but have grown. There's a whole industry of consultants out there agitating for and encouraging property owners to get these incentives. We'll talk about those, and then talk about TIF and its sort of cousin, the mega project, which is just a concept at this point, but there's been a lot of legislation. So why don't we start with the incentive assessments? So this is the laundry list of incentives available to property owners through Cook County. And as you can see, they all have a number and a letter associated with them. Probably the one that folks know the most about is the Class 6B, the industrial development. This is a 12-year incentive, reduces the level of assessment from 25% to 10 for the first 10 years, and then it clicks up to 15 and then 20, and it ends after a 12-year period, although it is renewable. And it's not uncommon to see these things renewed. So what is sort of sold as a 12-year incentive oftentimes becomes a 24-year incentive. Related are the 7A. This is for developments that redevelopment costs are going to be under 2 million. 7B, very similar, but redevelopment costs greater than 2 million. 7C is for like urban development areas. It's only a 5-year incentive, and it stands for commercial urban relief eligibility. D is a new one. This is for food deserts. You hear about parts of the city of Chicago in particular where their grocery stores have closed. This provides an incentive for a Mariano's or somebody to come in and open a store. The Class 8 is interesting. So this is a designation by township, and the only townships that I'm aware of in Cook County that have this designation are South Cook. So like Bloom and Thornton Township, that area. And in this case, and I've seen it happen several times now, a developer will come in and go to the municipality and say, let's say it's Harvey or Hazelcrest or something like that. I need this in order to build the warehouse that I'm looking to build or the commercial development, and they can get it. But this is limited to those townships where there's been this finding of severe economic stagnation. Another one for affordable rental, multifamily, Class 9. Class C is for contaminated properties where there needs to be significant remediation. Class L is for landmarks. So what would be a landmark? There's a couple of older office buildings on LaSalle Street, sort of the core of the central business district, that are quite old, and they have gotten the Class L. That's helped with the redevelopment of those properties, maintaining office, putting hotels in, creating some residential. Class S is just for the Section 8 housing voucher. And then open space is a little different. This is actually for, it gives you an alternative valuation rather than fair cash value. So let's say you have a 100-acre parcel that on a market value, it's worth $200,000 an acre. If it's going to be used for open space purposes, you can apply for that, get it, and the assessment would be reduced to more like 15 or 20,000 an acre. It's a very favorable incentive. Where you see open spaces with golf courses, you see it with corporate campuses like, the Motorola campus had it in Schaumburg, the BP campus in Naperville, there's open space out there. Allstate, which is now obviously being redeveloped with industrial, that had a lot of acres as open space. But that's what this program is. You should be aware of it. And municipalities, sometimes they share their incentive applications with the local school districts. Most times they don't. The next slide, though, gives a real good example of what's in these applications and why it might be worth your while to at least establish a relationship with the municipality and be aware of these things. So this is a recent 6B application that I looked at for what is currently a vacant office building in the north suburbs. And the proposal was for an industrial developer to come in, knock it down, and build about a 294,000 square foot warehouse building. What was interesting to me in looking at their projections is the applicant projected the value of the property for tax purposes would be $146.57 a square foot on a market value basis. They were saying this is what we think the assessor is going to assess the property at. So I saw that number and I'm like, that seems really high. I talked to an appraiser that we work with a lot. I asked him, can you send me a list of buildings that are 2 to 3 years old in the north suburbs, similar size? He sent it to me. We pulled all the assessments. Well, lo and behold, the assessments on these properties were nowhere near $147 a square foot. The range was $62 to $120 a square foot with an average of 100. So essentially, the applicant here, working through their consultant, had grossly overstated the property tax generation to make it look like, hey, if we do this, if you give us the 6B, there will be net property tax gain to the community. If you swap in $100 a square foot for $146.57, there's actually less property tax generation, and they would be better off leaving the building. Now, there are other reasons to want a vacant building to go away, and maybe why this industrial development would be an enhancement to the community and a benefit. From a property tax generation perspective, it simply didn't make sense. The math did not add up. And this application, and the information was presented to the municipality. It's ultimately their call. But, from your perspective, if you have these relationships or you should develop the relationships and you look at these things, they're worth taking a close look because we don't always get the tax projections. And in this case, which is fairly rare, we did. And the other thing is these municipalities supposedly are working with consultants to evaluate these applications. Hopefully they're doing their jobs and not just rubber stamping. But that's one example that I saw that was a bit of an eye opener for me. So let's talk about legislation on some of these other incentives now. So the first one that I think most of you may be aware of is Senate Bill 1391. Senator Ann Gillespie from the Arlington Heights area, she put forth years of effort to bring this bill to fruition, work closely with EdRed and some of the other school district groups to try to come up with solutions in the TIF area where there are currently sort of long-standing problems. So what 1391 does is it narrows the definition of blight. Currently, there are 13 factors. This narrowed it down to 9 factors. Currently, TIF districts are running for 23 years. This would have reduced it to 20. It provides for more authority for the JRB, more than just as a recommending body that can be ultimately ignored by the municipality. This is huge. It provides for school districts to opt out. Now, the flip side of that is that's essentially sort of the death penalty for these TIF districts because they're relying on the 60 to 70% of the bill that would otherwise go to the schools. And if schools opt out, it would make these programs, frankly, feasibly, economically infeasible in most cases. It also limits the transferring of money, which I know has been bothersome to many of you and me as well, where you have a successful, thriving TIF, village creates one right next door to it. Instead of surplusing out the money in the successful TIF, they transfer it to the new one, and you never see those dollars. So this bill's out there. It's not going to be addressed in the veto session. I had testified in support of the bill at the request of Senator Gillespie back in the spring. The IML also testified. They were pretty successful in sort of tapping the brakes on this, so we'll see what happens. Next legislation, this is, the mega project stuff. So this is what the name is very closely associated with the Chicago Bears. But ultimately, at least Senator Gillespie's bill is not limited to a new stadium in Arlington Heights. It would be available to a large battery plant, an EV facility, anything that would have to spend more than $500 million, create jobs, etc. That's Senator Gillespie's bill. Sponsored this not because she is supporting of it, but she wanted to control it. So when it first popped up, she is the principal sponsor in the Senate. Representative Walker, also from that area, he introduced an identical bill, 3565. Again, more for control purposes in terms of where's the legislation going. Representative Marty Moylan from the Des Plaines area, shortly thereafter, he came out with House Bill 4040. So this is more than just mega project on a statewide basis. This actually is focused on Arlington Heights, and it creates a special oversight board. It's called what is it called here? Hang on. The Arlington Mega Project Oversight Board. So this bill also spreads some of the money around to other communities, including the city of Chicago. Whereas the 1350 and 1365, there's really no voice for the schools whatsoever. With 1440, the school district superintendents are actually part of the oversight board, so it's a little more attractive. What all these bills ultimately do is they set up a system for a pilot, which is known as a payment in lieu of taxes. It's basically an assessment freeze. The assessment on the property is frozen at a certain level for a certain number of years. They only pay normal property taxes on that frozen amount. Anything above that would be in the form of a special payment or a pilot payment, which would be in addition to normal property taxes, and that would be negotiated. But again, this one's not going anywhere in the veto session. None of these bills are in the current veto session. We'll see what happens next year, because certainly there is demand for some of these major facilities to build batteries. Certainly the Bears are highly interested in something like this. So I think we'll know more in the coming months.
Great. Well, I am not seeing any questions in the Q&A. Eris or Mike, are you seeing anything?
No, I think we've been so comprehensive in our discussion here. There's really nothing else to be said.
Absolutely, and punctual, because we've kept it to exactly 1/2 hour, which is what we promised. So I will just say thank you again for joining us today. We hope you found today's webinar helpful. Please take a few minutes to sign up for our email alerts, where we regularly update our clients and friends on new developments and insights in the legal educational landscape. And we look forward to seeing all of you next month at III. Thank you again,
Hey,
and have a
Scott.
great afternoon.
Hey, Scott,
Yes.
there are a couple questions that just came in.
Oh my goodness. Okay, what
What does TOC stand for?
TOC stands for Tax Objection Complaint, which is primarily an issue in Cook County. Outside of Cook County, nearly everyone goes to PTAB to challenge their assessments. But in Cook County, there is an alternative remedy that's quite popular, to file a complaint in circuit court that does the same thing as a PTAB appeal, seeking to have the assessment reduced and get a property tax refund from the current collections of the districts.
Okay, Rob Gross has a couple of quick questions for those who want to stay around. Recapture levy's already been addressed. Is there anything you could say in 30 seconds about recapture levy again, Scott?
So Scott, the question is, and you answered it earlier, do you include the amount in your truth and taxation notice? Can you repeat that, if you don't mind?
It's not stated explicitly in either the property tax code or the school code. So what has to happen is that attorneys have to interpret it based on what we believe the General Assembly's intent was, and the construction of other statutes. And based on that, the fact that the Truth in Taxation Law was passed, I believe in the 1980s, well before the recapture levy was ever even thought of, plus the fact that it's a ministerial function of the county clerk's office rather than a discretionary function of the Board of Education. Our conclusion is that it does not need to be included in the Truth in Taxation notice.
All right. Well, thank you for that.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good day.